I've entitled it, Coming Clean with God. Now, if you come clean with your coworker, you come clean with your boss, you come clean with a family member, that's a good feeling, isn't it? You clear the air. But what about coming clean with God? I'm not sure where you are spiritually. We're all at different pilgrimage, at different places in our pilgrimage and in our walk with the Lord. But I think it's very healthy, it's very wholesome, it's very beneficial to us every day to come clean with God. We're going to be looking at the psalmist David, and of all the characters in the Old and New Testament, David would have to be one of my favorites because I see him speaking so much from the heart. And this is his feelings. He's really striving to do what is right, to do what is good. Let's look at Psalms 139. It will be the last two verses in Psalms 139. Now, this is a prayer. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. And see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. May God add his blessings to the reading, the proclamation, the understanding of his holy and blessed word. Let me begin this morning by asking you a question. Who's sitting in your seat today? Who's sitting in your seat? Now you may say, well, that's a crazy question. I'm sitting in my seat. Well, okay, let me carry it a step further and approach it a different way. Which one of you is sitting in your seat today? Which one of you? See, there's actually three people in our seats, or the possibility of three. See, there's the person you think you are. Then there's the person that other people think you are. And then there's the person that God knows you to be. Now, when I was a child growing up, my childhood superhero, well, without telling you right now, let me give you a hint or two. He could leap tall buildings with a single bound. He was more powerful than a locomotive. He was faster than a speeding bullet. Andy Griffith, right? No, he was another one of my child heroes, but that superhero we all know to be Superman. Now, Superman had that X-ray vision. He could see through buildings. He could see through walls. He could see through doors. He could see through trees. There's only one thing Superman couldn't see through. Lead. Now, I think about God in relation to what the psalmist David is saying. And we're reminded that God has X-ray vision. He sees everything. He knows everything. But unlike Superman, he can not only see through buildings and walls and doors and trees. Guess what? He can see through us. He can see through us. He knows who we are. He knows every little minute detail about us. Adam and Eve learned you can run from God, but you can't hide. They learned that. That's exactly why it is important for us every day to start the day off, to go to bed at night, making sure that things are clean between you and God. Looking at Psalms, not just 139, but looking at Psalms, I'm reminded so much about David and what he wanted to do. And that is really what he wanted to do. See, this passage that we're reading is really a prayer. It is a prayer convincing us that he really did want to come clean with God. Whatever impurities are there, whatever's not right, Lord, I want you to take that and make that clean. Now, real quickly, as fast as I possibly can, but giving God the honor and the time also, I want us to look at four things that we see right here in this passage that will reveal the sin and to cleanse any stain. And we need to make it in our lives every day to come clean with God. It's a wonderful feeling. It's a beautiful feeling. It is a way in which God can use us best. The first part of verse 23. Search me, O God, and know my heart. These are not just words that somebody's writing. These are words that are coming right straight from the heart of the psalmist. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Now, David goes to the heart of the problem. And you know, so many times the heart of the problem is a problem with the heart. Inwardly, there's a problem inside. I deal with enough people in a year's time, several hundred, even thousands of people. A lot of them are Christians. A lot of them would not profess to know the Lord. But in conversation and interacting with them, you can pick up on the things of the heart. Maybe there's that bitterness, there's that resentment, there's that hate, there's that animosity. There's things that aren't good. There are impurities that need to be cleansed. So David goes right to the heart of the problem and would acknowledge that for him it was a problem of the heart. Now, when we pray this prayer to the Lord, we're really asking the Lord, put me, Lord, under your spiritual CAT scan. Now, some of us have been through CAT scans. Some of us know what a CAT scan is and what it does. And you can look, and somebody that knows what they're doing, a radiologist, can look at all of those things in a CAT scan. So this is what's wrong, this is what's wrong, this and this. Oh, now that's okay. This right here is not okay. When we put ourselves under God's spiritual CAT scan, he reveals to us the things that need to be revealed. Maybe we could put it another way and say we need to ask God to perform spiritual open heart surgery on us. Now, I find it interesting as I read this chapter and reread this chapter that God or David asked God to search him and to know him. But yet when we go to the opening verses in this same psalm, he acknowledged, God has searched me, and God does know me. And then we get to the very end, and he's asking God to do the very same thing, as if he hasn't already done that. What do I make of that? How do I explain that? The way I look at this and understand that there is a difference between relationship and fellowship. Our relationship with God is permanent. Our relationship, when we make a commitment to the Lord, when we acknowledge him, that is to be a permanent relationship. But now that fellowship with the Lord can come and go, depending upon where we are in our hearts. I'm convinced, and the more I say this, the more I believe it. We can only truly have fellowship with God when our hearts are pure. Unless we have a pure heart, we cannot experience the fullness of that fellowship, which enhances the relationship. Even James tells us in his book, and James is another character that I really enjoy his writings. Draw near unto God, and what will God do? He'll draw near unto you. Cleanse your heart, O sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. What James is saying. Calls a spade, doesn't he? See, I see the psalmist David wanting God to bring to light what he would normally hide from others. God reveal it. Now, the heart is the most powerful part of the human body. Look at your fist, and your heart will be just a tad bit more on the average than the size of your fist. It expands and it contracts somewhere around 70 times a minute, depending upon your activity. It pumps an average of 1,500 gallons of blood every day through your body. And in a lifetime, the heart pumps enough blood to fill 12 to 15 super tankers, all holding 1 million barrels. It's a lot of blood. But the heart is not the only engine that keeps us alive. The heart that I'm really talking about is the very core of our being. I'm talking about the very center of who we are. Solomon, and we're talking about David here. Solomon, in case you don't know, was David's son. And in Proverbs 23:7, he writes, "For as a man thinks in his heart, so he is." As a man thinks in his heart. Now think about that. You are what you think. You are what you think. The heart serves as that spiritual core. And it is only through that heart that a man can be saved and know God. It is because of the giving of our heart to God that we come to that saving relationship, that we come to know him intimately and have that fellowship. Romans 10:9-10 says, "For with the heart one believes and is justified, and with the mouth one confesses and is saved. For the scripture says, everyone who believes in him will not be put to shame." But looking at this and looking at Psalms 139, I've got to ask, as I try to critique this and get into everything that is being said here, why does David ask God to search his heart? Doesn't David know his own heart? Well, it may surprise you to hear the answer. No, not fully. I'm not sure that any of us really know our hearts until we sit back and we allow God to examine our hearts and to see what needs to be there. Jeremiah tells us the heart is deceitful above all things and is desperately wicked. Who can understand it? I, the Lord, search your heart and test your mind. See, we need to allow God to see the things in us and reveal to us the things that maybe we don't see and maybe others don't see. So let's admit it. Sometimes our hearts develop a lot of trash. You let riffraff come knock on your door, and what do? You answer it, and you throw the door open wide. Anger shows up at the heart, and you let them in. What about revenge? Revenge needs to stay. You invite that revenge into your heart, and you make them feel welcome. Pity wants to have a party in your heart. You take them to the kitchen and say, hey, cook up all the pity you want to. What about lust? Lust rings the doorbell of your heart when you roll out the carpet. Say, come on in. Stay a while. No matter what kind of facade you put up on the outside, it's the heart that determines whether you are truly right with God. No matter what you see on the outside, and that's true for any of us. No matter what kind of facade you put, where the heart is what really matters. Okay, let's go to the second step here. The latter part of verse 23. Try me and know my thoughts. Try me and know my thoughts. Now David goes from the heart to the mind here to know my thoughts. David is saying, Lord, I want you to show me any thoughts that carry me away from having that relationship with you that I deep down want to have and I know you want me to have. You see, I believe that it is just as important to keep your mind clean as it is to keep your heart clean. Did you know that the mind, in many ways, is more powerful than the body, particularly in determining the quality of life that you have? You keep your thoughts positive because your thoughts, sooner or later, become your words. You keep your words positive because those words will be carried out in your actions. You keep your actions positive because those actions will soon develop your habits. You keep those habits positive because those habits will soon develop and determine your values. You keep your values positive, and sooner or later, it's going to determine your destiny. Now note, all of that starts there in the mind. Sometimes God brings testing to our lives, as we read. And he tries us. He tries us in the midst of our fears, in the midst of our anxieties. Why? We've all been through those trying times. So that God can allow us to put our trust in him. Sometimes people ask me, what can I do? What am I supposed to do? The only answer I know, you've got to trust God. And you don't trust God until you spend time with him and get to know him and have that fellowship. But before you have that fellowship, you've got to have that relationship. I heard about the man that came home from work one day, and his wife was sitting in a chair in a funk of depression. And he said, honey, what's wrong? And she said, I'm having trouble with the car. There's water in the carburetor. With a strange look on his face, he says, water in the carburetor? That's ridiculous. She says, I'm telling you, there's water in the carburetor. And he looks at her and says, you don't even know what a carburetor is. Where's the car? He said, in the swimming pool. Well, sometimes the point is, we don't need to hide our fears. We don't need to hide our anxieties. We don't need to hide our worries. We need to let God expose and reveal those things to us so that we might be able to deal with them and allow God to fix our faith. Now, that may be a good sermon there. How to allow God to fix our faith. And in doing so, we bring our focus back to God. Look at verse 24. I'll call it 24a, the first part of verse 24. And see if there is any wickedness. I like the King James Version. Just if there's any wickedness in me. David doesn't leave any stones unturned. Okay, God, I want you to bring that all out, Lord. He wants no attitude. He wants no action to be present in his life that would cause pain to his Lord, to himself, or to others. David is wanting God to put him under the knife. Okay, God, I want you to cut out any sin cancer that may be going on. Any sin cancer that may be growing in my life. Now, when I think about this is really very unusual. In this day and time, in the age in which we live, and I thought about this as the choir was singing their special, we really don't see that kind of attitude in a lot of people's life that we see right here with David. We see a man standing up and saying, God, I want you to reveal anything in my life that is harmful to me, that is not good for me, that does not glorify you, that not only may be harmful to me, but may be harmful to others. See, today, we don't like to talk about sinful ways and wicked ways, and when we do talk about that around the wrong people, what do? They just roll their eyes. I don't want to hear that. See, we don't talk about wickedness. We like to call that weakness. We don't like to talk about adulterous relationships being sinful. We just call it inappropriate. We soften the tone. We don't call sin, sin. And we don't even want to call it transgressions. We say, well, I've got a problem. A lot of times it's a sin problem. Now, we're living in a society that finally has figured it out, how to eliminate the right and wrong. First, just do away with God. We see it all over the place. People are doing away with God. Take God out of this, take God out of that. If we get rid of God, then what happens? We get rid of the sin problem. If we're not talking about God, then we're not talking about sin. And if we're not talking about sin, we don't have to worry about the guilt associated with sin. And then if we're not having that guilt, then we don't have any responsibility. And if there's not any responsibility, then there's no punishment. See, we're softening all of that up. But God's word is still God's word. And then real quickly in closing, the latter part of verse 24. And lead me in the way everlasting. See, there's a right way and there's a wrong way in life. There's the high road, there's the low road. There's the broad way that leads to hell. There's the narrow way that leads to heaven. For David, this is what I see as being his bottom line. He wanted to make sure that he was on the road to heaven. He wanted to make sure that he was in the right relationship with God and had come clean. He wanted to make sure that he was living a life of virtue and not vice. He wanted to make sure that he was on the road to God, pleasing God, and not Satan. David was determined that his life was going to count for something beyond himself. Okay. There's a lot more to be said. There's a lot that's already been said today about our own lives, coming clean with God. And it's not something we do once or twice a year or at the beginning of a new year. It's something we need to do every day. Before you lay your head down at night, get clean with God. As you wake up in the morning and live out there in the real world, we need to make sure that we're on the right road, walking the high way, not the low way, and allowing God to have his way. See, we study the life of David here. We see a lot of great things. But those great things happened when he was in the right relationship with the Lord, when he came clean, clearing out all those impurities in his life. We can do the same thing. Let's pray.